Hello, this is David Mandell, host of the podcast. Thanks for joining us. We are deep in the middle of the 2025 Summer Rewind series. And our podcast is on an academic calendar, which means we have new episodes coming out every 2 weeks from September to June. And then in the summer, we still have episodes coming out every 2 weeks, like today, but they're part of our Summer Rewind series, where I look back not on the last season that just ended this June in 25, which was season 5, but I'm looking at season 3 and season 4, and looking for episodes that are evergreen that I think are really valuable, just as valuable today as when they originally came out. And hopefully those of you who have seen it or listened to it before, you'll be reminded of some of the lessons. And for many of you, I'm sure you didn't catch it. And so it's it's new to you, as they say. Today's episode is with Dr. Shaminder Gupta. We call him Shammi. And it's an unexpected career path and lessons from the business side of medicine. Shammi's had an interesting career. He's in the New Orleans area, was significantly affected, and this is that unexpected twist by Hurricane Katrina. And that really changed where he was going to practice and how and what kind of institution. And that's an interesting kind of story that I think you'll like to hear, and how he adapted to that, and a good story of resiliency and flexibility. And then he's also been quite involved in business. And while still maintaining clinical practice, he's been an executive at a startup that's been rolling up practices in his specialty, and has become quite significantly ensconced in the business end of medicine and what he's learned from that. So he's a dynamic guest, and we have a good time talking, and I like him a lot, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. This was originally season 3, episode 13. I hope you enjoy.
Welcome to the Wealth Planning for the Modern Physician podcast, where we talk to doctors like you about their real-world lessons in financial matters and hear from industry experts who can impact your personal bottom line. The host of our podcast is David Mandell. David is an attorney, OJM Group partner, and author of more than a dozen books on wealth planning for physicians. Now, let's turn the mic over to David.
Hello, this is David Mandell, host of the podcast. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a very interesting guest. I am excited to talk with him, and I'm sure you'll learn a couple things from him as well. Let me tell you about Dr. Shammi Gupta, and then I will give you his brief bio. Again, he's another one of these docs with a very significant bio, so we're going to cut it down, and then in the show notes, we will have a link to his LinkedIn, as well as another professional bio. So plenty for you guys to read up on. But Dr. Shaminder Gupta is a practicing internist and nephrologist in the greater New Orleans area. His practice focuses on the long-term management of chronic kidney disease and end-stage renal disease. His medical training was done at Louisiana State University School of Medicine in New Orleans. He currently serves as the Chief Medical Officer for Monogram Healthcare. In this role, he is working to establish population-based programs that impact the lives of patients with chronic kidney disease. These programs interface with payers to help create patient-based outcomes that are also cost-effective and efficient. So with that, Shammi, welcome to the program.
Hi, David. Thank you for the invite today. We're looking forward to our discussion.
So we're going to talk about a number of things. You and I have chatted a bunch over the last year, and there's some interesting business things going on and entrepreneurship. But let's start, as I try to with all the physicians, start with you and sort of your background. So tell us, where'd you grow up? What made you become a physician, and how did you gravitate into nephrology?
Yeah, thanks, David. So I'm a lifelong Louisianian. So I was born and raised in Louisiana and grew up in a town called Lafayette, Louisiana, home of the Raging Cajuns. So I was an undergrad at University of Southwestern Louisiana. And I grew up in a town of about 100,000 people. Really loved my life growing up. My father immigrated to the United States in 1963 as a 16-year-old, and even got educated here in medical school. My dad is an anesthesiologist, or retired anesthesiologist. Yeah. And really inspired me to choose a career in the field of medicine, although I desired more patient care than anesthesiologists traditionally have. And really, he motivated from the time I was young, went to med school at LSU, and and chose a career in internal medicine / nephrology along the way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'm the black sheep. So father and grandfather physicians, but just couldn't didn't click with me like it did with my brother. So but we've had, and I know you're a listener of this podcast. We were just talking about the last episode which you listened to. We've had a fair amount of physicians who are second generation, but actually not as many as I would have thought so far. Again, limited sample size, but good to see that. And yeah, you're a Louisianan all the way through. Did all your training there? Everything, right? Yeah,
did all my training. I thought as I was growing up, in Indian families, if you're not a cardiologist or a gastroenterologist, you're basically, short of what you should be accomplishing. So my father got over the fact that I chose renal, but I always enjoyed the numbers aspects of medicine, and nephrology is all numbers based for the most part and allows you to be very cerebral and didactic in figuring out what's going on. So I was drawn to that as a medical student, and some of my mentors were nephrologists along the way. But yeah, I dreamt of, I worked in the charity hospital system here my entire career until joining Monogram, and really always wanted to be that doctor, that professor leading the medical school or leading the department, kind of the folks you see as a trainee. I envisioned myself in that same role when I was first starting out in this space. And obviously things have gone a little differently for me, but that's kind of what I was dreaming of doing all the way through. I've had the privilege of being able to teach residents and medical students in my practice, which is at a hospital just south of New Orleans in a town called Houma, Louisiana, for the past 17 years. So I did get to do both kind of, but not by choice, really kind of by accident.
Yeah.
And really, very fortunate to have had that happen to me. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's enough there. Plan A. I mean, you kind of knew what you want to do, but life is always Plan B. It doesn't go exactly how we expect. So, obviously, this being a listener, this podcast, has a slant, obviously, on finance, on entrepreneurship, on wealth planning. So, as you went through your training, was this a topic that was of interest to you, or were you, on the other end of the spectrum? Hey, I'm just thinking about being a doctor, clinical, and I've never picked up the Wall Street Journal in my life. So where were you on that spectrum?
No, great question. So I alluded to my father earlier. He was an anesthesiologist.
Yeah.
And I learned firsthand he was doing very well financially in the 80s as a physician, but had an unexpected health event that made him disabled, basically, where he was unable to work for 5 years. So I saw him go from being in his mid-40s at the top of the mountain to struggling. So my only thing I was interested in was not ever being in that position without some redundancies. So my exposure was like most, probably save for retirement, max out your 401k. And as a resident, I would do that. I sought out the 403B plan in our residency program, which most residents did not take advantage of. And I put money into there from the beginning, even a few $100s. And then when I started moonlighting, I would put almost all of my money into the 403B. So I wanted to, in my mind, have some comfort for my future self. But in terms of day-to-day investing or other things like that, I was not very savvy, keen, or interested, to be honest with you, too much later. But I didn't want to be in the position that my dad found himself in unexpectedly out of nowhere. And I was 18 years old when that happened to him. So
did that also, when it came time to look at disability insurance, was that something that, a lot of people are, not going to say hesitant to it. I mean, I still pay my disability insurance and I hope I never get disabled, right? It's like one of those things, like a lot of insurances, you do it and you bite the bullet because you have to have it because, God forbid something happens. Was that something that was like high on your radar because of your dad's experience?
Yes, most definitely. So between disability and life, I've always been very proactive in those spaces because I saw it firsthand. Like you said, you hope you never need it, but if you don't have it, you feel like insecure, I believe. So definitely. It was paramount for me to have that from the get-go all the way through and still do.
Yeah, it's interesting for us. I mean, Jason, my partner, and Michael and some of the other folks on our team are really the ones who handle insurances in general and disability. But, with over 1,000 physician clients, we've had a couple go on disability. And I can tell you at that point, it's the most important thing they ever did, right? From a financial point of view, it is their best investment because it's protecting them from, what could be a double whammy, which is not being able to work and not having income.
Correct.
They're getting a steady income. And if ideally they do it right, then it should be tax-free income. So tell us about coming out of training, your first job. What, you were a Louisianan, and my guess is you weren't even looking at jobs outside of Louisiana. So that kind of focused in your job search, which actually probably made it a lot easier. But were there any financial factors that came into play? And if they were, tell us about that.
Yeah, so as a nephrologist, you don't learn a lot about finances as a trainee, like most trainees in the country. But in nephrology, it was one of the few fields that had this business component to it. At a very high level, you always understood as a nephrologist that one day you would own your practice, be a partner, potentially be a medical director for a dialysis center, or even own the center or do a joint venture. So in a very nebulous way, that was the opportunities we would look for as nephrologists coming out in 2004 when I finished my fellowship. So that's what I was looking for, a practice that would allow me to mature to partner, potentially be part of those financial opportunities while doing what I love. So that's what I envisioned for myself at the beginning. The initial salaries and other things weren't really that important and hard to negotiate anyway. So I looked for a geographical location. I started in New Orleans, and my first job was a true private practice with a few partner physicians, which actually didn't really work out for me. It didn't really, I didn't enjoy it because I missed the teaching component that I desired at the beginning of my career, and I was unable to do that. So I quickly realized that I wasn't going to be successful financially or emotionally in this job about 9 months in. And this is in 2004, going into 2005, when subsequently Katrina happened in August of 2005 in New Orleans. So a life-changing event for me, just having been in private practice on my own for 3 months. So leaving my practice in May of 05, having a young daughter of 3, a newborn, and a brand new mortgage, and becoming unemployed basically overnight as I was starting my practice 3 months in. So it was quite an eye-opening experience for me at a young age. So that's what shaped some of my early decisions in my career.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So you take a job private, you realize that, hey, there's this teaching component that's missing. So you say, okay, I think, really important that you realize that and that connected with you early, right? Because, some people, it takes them. I mean, can't tell you how many docs who've kind of felt that way. It may not have been about teaching, it might have been about something else.
Yeah.
It takes them 5 years from that feeling to finally executing a leave, right? Because the fear of the unknown and just all of that. So you were able to do that. And then you went into your solo practice where there was a teaching element, or what was the alternative?
Right. So I took a position as a hospitalist at the university, but I had my own small private practice that I kept open. So I was trying to build my practice basically from the hospitalist job I took. So I was trying to build my practice that way. So I had a steady source of income from the university. I had the flexibility of having my own practice with my own expenses, obviously. And that was my original plan, was to build it that way. See patients, have a paycheck, and anybody who was unreferred or didn't have a doctor, potentially have them see me in the CKD space and build my practice that way over time. So I might have been very naive at that time, but I think that was my goal, was to be independent. I didn't want to really be tied down to a group or restricted at that time.
So then Katrina hits, and just tell us what happens then. I mean, just like what happens in that. I mean, I know there's that TV show my brother's cardiologist has told me to watch about the hospital, but like, take us through like that 3-month period, and then how did it change over the 3-year period? Your trajectory where you did.
Great question. So previously to me taking that first job as a private practitioner, I used to moonlight at a rural hospital in Houma, Louisiana, where I currently built my practice. And when I was finishing up, they offered me a job there, but it was a 60-mile commute one way from New Orleans, very small town. My wife has her own business, and we were not prepared to move to a small town. So I turned them down. So as soon as the hurricane hit, I basically reached back out to that hospital, which did not have nephrology services, had a teaching service. And I said, I need some work. And I'd love to take you up on that opportunity from last year, thinking it'd be limited. So I came on as a 3.5-day-a-week doctor, trying to build my practice in New Orleans, still trying to do it all, and really just struggling to pay my mortgage. I just bought a home. I had 2 young children, and it was a lot of desperation going on. But able to withstand that, rebuilding the city of New Orleans, rebuilt our home that had flooded, and I just stuck with it in that first 3-month period, up to 3-year period, and now 17-year period. Yeah. So that opportunity down the bayou, we call it. So it's about 60 miles south of New Orleans. Never thought I'd be commuting to an office 60 miles each way. Found I was very happy in that environment. And most importantly, had the opportunity to build a nephrology practice there because they didn't have on-site nephrology. So I was able to teach residents and medical students. I was able to be a hospitalist and provide care on the floor. And I had the independence to build a nephrology program there because they didn't have one. So basically started from scratch there in November of 2005 and built the program one patient at a time. And with a heavy focus on home-based dialysis eventually, which is how I have taken the next step to the place I am now. But that's how it happened. It was out of desperation, out of just kind of, I got to do something. And it ended up being the thing I love the most in retrospect. And but Katrina really changed my life in many ways. But in retrospect, was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it forced me to do something I may not have ever done before, and remained open-minded to it over time. Because a lot of places are far away, but the drive is just the drive now. It's not a negative anymore for me like it was at the beginning, and very difficult.
Yeah, it's interesting. So a couple of thoughts on that. One is, now I know why you listen to all of our podcasts, because you got podcast time, and that's what I try to do with my drive. I don't have a long commute, but my family in South Florida live about 30 miles away, which, depending on the time of day, could be 30 minutes, or 60 minutes. So I'm in the car, and that's when I listen to a lot of podcasts. And it's interesting. My father, was a radiologist. And he, in the beginning, we were very young, worked in Rhode Island Hospital. I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, and that was just, that was 10 minutes away. But he spent most of his career and was a chief at a hospital in Fall River, which is about 35, 40 minutes each way. But, this is before cell phones, right? This is before podcasts. But, I've asked him about it, and he said, that those times are like my wind down times. This is the time to think. This is my time to, listen to NPR or whatever he was doing at the time. And, I think, I don't know the drive that you have, but my guess, if it's somewhat rural, it's not like bumper to bumper the whole time. No. So if it's a relaxing drive, I think some people actually find that time peaceful, and especially with technology today, you can be useful. So,
my drive has evolved from, like you mentioned, with no technology to now nothing but technology. So it's gotten better for me, really. And you make a good point. The wind down time is very important. My children are grown up now. My daughter's 21, my son's 18. But over the years, when I'd come home, I'd have all my work done. So whether it was phone calls or listening to something or catching up with something on the podcast, et cetera, I was done. So when I got home, my mind was free. I was there for my wife and children, able to go to games and coach and participate, and not have work looming over my head, which I really now value that so much more than I did at the beginning when I was first doing it. And I still get the question, you drive down there every day? And I said, I still drive down. Even in my new role at Monogram, I still drive down because it's part of my daily routine. So, I still see dialysis patients for Monogram. My practice now belongs to them. And I still see patients here. So I make the commute. I drive down here. I work in my office down the bayou the same way I did, even though I could work from home. It's just part of my day. So,
yeah, it's interesting. And like, it's all about, plan B. Never thought you would do that, but in the end of the day, maybe it was a blessing in disguise. At least that piece, obviously. So let's talk about your practice. You just mentioned, hey, my practice, Monogram. I mentioned in the bio. So your practice was eventually sold, and it prompted a transition. So how did that come about? What did you learn from that process? And then we'll talk about what you're doing. Monogram now.
Sure. So just a little bit of background. As I built the practice down in Houma, Louisiana, I started building a practice that focused on home-based dialysis. Again, not really knowing much about it as a trainee, met some influential people at some dinners. I started chit-chatting with them, and they said, that's where the space is going. This is in 2008. Fast forward 10 years, I built one of the largest home dialysis programs in the state of Louisiana for a single physician, and got a lot of notoriety for it. I served as the Kidney Foundation president. I was talking about home dialysis all around the board. And as the space grew to value-based care, which in my world, I was always practicing value-based care in the charity hospital system. I wasn't driven by fee-for-service and number of visits. I was always driven by just being able to do what's right for the patient, because I was a salaried physician.
Right.
And now thinking about that. And then Monogram Health decided to launch in the Gulf states. And that was their first launching point. And our paths crossed in my leadership roles down here. And I was doing mostly the same things they were trying to achieve as a company across the country. So that's how our worlds intersected back in 2018, early 19, just pre-pandemic. Meanwhile, I'm looking for something else to do besides slogging it away, working nights and moonlighting and doing things like that. So this is a great opportunity to transition into something that's more corporate and bring my skill set and experiences to a larger company. So as we grew together, Monogram and I eventually decided that the practice, and they're managing my practice in the sense of the day-to-day of the dialysis patients. I get to still see them. So it was a lateral/forward move into a different space. And they were very gracious enough to allow me to continue to see patients while the transition was happening, but wanted me to be all in, with them. So that's kind of how the decision was made by myself after a lot of contemplation. It took some time. And not to make this about hurricanes, but Hurricane Ida hit our area again 18 months ago. which prompted my practice to lose about 30% of the patients we had.
Wow.
Because of relocation and the devastation that happened. So I said, I don't know if I can withstand another hurricane or anything like that anyway myself. So this may be a great opportunity to take advantage of this growing company and bring my expertise and knowledge to the whole country-based approach as opposed to a small local-based approach. So the timing again was prompted by something that impacted me that I didn't have any control over. So that's kind of it in a nutshell, David, how it happened. Yeah.
And at Monogram, I think you have the clinical role, obviously seeing patients, but you play some other roles as well, right? And you get exposed to other kind of business people and business thinking. So tell us a little bit about that role is, and what you're learning as being in that seat.
So I had no exposure in the business side of this at all, other than doing a joint venture with a dialysis company and learning that kind of on my own. So this has been a golden opportunity for me to meet all kinds of interesting people, smart people in the business space, clinicians. The practice is a very small part of my day. It's really about building a program across the country to do all the things you mentioned in the intro, value-based care for chronic kidney disease and end-stage kidney disease. But learning on the job has been fantastic and fun for me. I'm in the room with a lot of people who make big decisions. I'm contributing to those decisions. I have the opportunity to work with Senator Bill Frist, who's the chairman of the board of our company. Never would have had that opportunity in any other way. And I wasn't seeking it out, but I think because I was doing something I loved and being passionate about it, has opened other opportunities for me. And that's what I really would like to convey to others. I think doing what you love and being passionate about it, but also being open to meetings and opportunities is where you really can take the next step into the next stratosphere of opportunity. And I pinch myself every day really thinking that I'm doing what I was doing in Houma, Louisiana, New Orleans, Louisiana, now in 40 states, and really impacting the lives of thousands of patients through our protocols we've developed.
That's great. Yeah, it is, I think, sort of a theme of this podcast, I think, because the folks who come on here is that if you're passionate about an area of medicine, there's probably a business opportunity around that too. Doesn't mean everybody wants to take it. I mean, there's plenty of docs who, they're just busy enough and happy enough in their life, want to be clinicians only. And that there's nothing negative to that, but there is an opportunity for those, and especially young docs who are listening, who say, could I combine this with some kind of entrepreneurial activity? And, what you're saying, and a lot of the folks who've been on here, is keep your ears and eyes open, and those opportunities may come.
Yeah, I found that, obviously clinicians are good clinicians, but if you can communicate and are open-minded to hearing good ideas from others, they need doctors to help manage these healthcare companies, doctors who are effective, who can communicate, who know what they're talking about. And those CEOs seek those types of physicians out for these roles, as long as you have some clinical experience that is where you're an expert or can share your expertise. And so I would encourage any young physician listening to your podcast to spend that first 5-10 years to distinguish themselves in some way, whether they're a hospitalist or a cardiologist or orthopedic surgeon, nephrologist. What do you do that's different than your colleagues? Because medicine is becoming very commoditized, where we can all just be interchangeable. You can hire another doctor for less money, and then you don't get that raise or get that promotion unless you have some special skill that you're good at and that you love. So I would encourage anybody listening to this podcast to really do that as they're building their career.
Yeah, that's great advice. Maybe we'll come back to that in the last piece of advice at the end. So your wife is also an entrepreneur. She's a business person. Tell us a little bit about her business, and I know it's growing. So give us a little insight there.
Yeah. So, my wife, I admire her work ethic and all she's done. She immigrated here on her own from India in 1989 and became an architect, and then an interior designer, then an urban planner. And she was as we had our children, her career took a slow down for a few years for the first 5 years of our children's lives as they were growing up. And in 2008, she decided to open her own business, focusing on interior design. And now she is a entrepreneur who owns her own business, focusing on wallpaper, upholstery, and interior design through the greater New Orleans and Louisiana markets. She's a woman business owned by a woman, has 2 full-time employees. And she's done very, very well for herself. Serves on the City Planning Commission of New Orleans now, and has become an expert in her field. And I couldn't be more proud of her to see what she's doing on her own. Took that leap of faith and it took time to develop her idea.
Sure.
But 15 years later, she's doing exactly what she wants to do when she wants to do it. So her business is called Spruce, and it's located in New Orleans.
Okay. Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes too. Great. So I want to talk a couple questions on like wealth management.
Yep.
So, as you've gone through your career, you've had challenges, obviously, hurricane related and others. How have you handled wealth management decisions? Have you tried to, in the spectrum between, hey, I outsource it all, I have a good team, and et cetera,
Yep.
to I do it all myself? Where are you on that spectrum? How have you found advisors? What's worked? What hasn't worked? Give us a little insights around that
Yeah.
time.
I think in the beginning, it was kind of more myself, self-directed, retirement type planning, index funding, some of the stuff. I was always interested in general about reading about it. I've had an accountant for years who's
Yeah.
been working with me since I was a resident and has been I bounce things off of him. He helps me out to make some of these decisions. Some naivety, frankly, thinking every deal is going to work out. So I swing for the fences sometimes and,
Right.
and have not always hit home runs, but I learned that from my father, who's also a pretty a risk taker a lot in the
Yeah.
business space. But yeah, but really at the beginning, just a lot of me followed by my accountant. But now I think the team is crucial. Having a banker, I have an accountant, a banker, a lawyer, all that kind of help me make the decisions about life changes or transitional changes. But in terms of wealth management, that's been my general approach, and taking some calculated risks here and there as they present themselves, with the advice of the team that I work with. So
And it, in those relationships, has there been like a key success factor? Are you obviously? It sounds like you've worked with some of the people for a long time. One
yeah,
of the challenges sometimes people have is, hey, I got this person from fellowship, and I think I
yeah.
might have outgrown them. Um, Others, struggle to find somebody they can trust, and they're not really sure how to do that. If you were talking to, let's say a young doc or experienced doc coming into the area, how would you tell them to, try to find the right people around them?
Yeah, I think the trust is very important because only somebody who trusts can tell you that that's a bad deal, and I tell you what you want to hear. So I think
Mhm.
I've had the fortunate of that. With I don't know if that's right for you. Are you sure you want to do that?
Right.
So that's a very important, I think, for someone to be able to tell you that as well, or maybe push you to do something that you may not have thought you should be doing because it does sound like a good opportunity because they know your personality and risk tolerance well. I think the challenge, of course, is as you alluded to, is how to grow that team, how to find, make somebody maybe who was doing everything for you, maybe focus on one thing versus the other. I'm at that point in my life and career now where, I'm contemplating how to grow that team, as my needs change, as my finances have changed. Children in college, wife with a business, financial, some opportunities to invest in other things. So, yeah, that's been my general approach. But I think the key is having someone.
Yeah.
As you grow into this space, you got to have somebody that you trust that you can talk to. It's probably not your relative. It's probably not your brother-in-law. It's probably not your cousin. It's somebody that really knows what you need to have done, and will spend the time to help understand what your goals are at each stage of the way, each stage of development. So,
Absolutely. It fits with my approach personally, and also, how we work with clients here at OJM. So, what do you see in the future? What's going on with you in terms of where do you see in the next 3 or 5 years in terms of what you're doing? And then we'll wrap up with, my typical last question. So,
sure. I mean, I'm very excited where we are. The Monogram has grown tremendously. We've been very successful with our modeling and continue to grow across the country. I'm really proud of what we're doing and providing the care of these patients who need it most. For me personally, I'm just enjoying where I am right now. I never would have imagined I'd be at this company having a podcast with you, David. I
right.
never could have imagined this even happening to me in any way. But I'm enjoying it, and embracing it, and realizing that I'm a thought leader in this space, and I want
Yeah.
to continue to grow in that space and share my experiences as to the next opportunity, beyond Monogram. That's kind of where I see myself now. But I'm also a dad with two college kids. My wife and I've been married for 25 years. We're empty nesters now, basically,
Right.
or on the brink of it. So looking forward to that next phase of life and enjoying what the stuff we like to do. And I'm really excited about that. So,
Yeah, that's it. It is great. Um, so let's end with the last question. I ask all the docs on here, and you know this because you're a listener. What's the one thing that you would advise, let's say, a fellow, or even
yeah,
going back to yourself, Shammi?
yeah,
We're back,
yeah.
we're on the clock, 25 years, and say, hey, I only got one piece of advice for you in the area of finance or work, et cetera.
Yeah.
What would it be?
I think the one thing that residents and fellows do have is time. So, taking the advantage of the time horizon to invest and participate is something they often don't take advantage of, or I wish I'd have taken more advantage of. I think saving for your future self. I mean, no matter what happens in the middle, the goal is to be comfortable when you retire. So you might not hit a home run on every investment, but if you're socking money away every month, when you're 60, 65, you'll be fine. In the middle, you'll be fine too, because we're doctors and we earn well. And we may not be able to have everything we want, but we have more than most.
Right.
So I think being happy and satisfied in the middle, I think taking calculated risks, you don't hit home runs without striking out every once in a while. So it's okay to miss the ball sometimes, but don't miss out on something because you're afraid, but do it early so you can make up for it if it doesn't happen. And I think lastly is always take a meeting. I think if you're going to, it's nothing wrong with hearing somebody out. It may not be fruitful that day, but they could connect you to someone else. That's happened to me multiple times in my career where the first person I met wasn't the one, but connected me to someone else who was that opportunity. So, those would be the few bits of advice I would give myself 25 years ago, or, someone coming out now. And lastly, do what you love, as you I know that's the theme of your podcast for a lot of the people who participate.
Yeah.
If you're not happy doing your job, you're not going to be successful, across the board, whether it be at your home or at work or anywhere else. It'll come out, and there's a lot of unhappy doctors out there who are trapped in their space and field and feel like they want to leave, but they can't. And it gets to be too late sometimes. So I think, being honest with yourself is something that's really important too.
A lot of good stuff there. I mean, the first point, it's really, we say this in terms of investments, it's not timing the market, it's time in the market. And I think I've said this on another podcast, but start, Warren Buffett's net worth, if he had retired and stopped investing at 65, he'd been worth like 50 million, which is, obviously a ton of money, but it's not a billionaire. It's not 50 billion.
Right.
And so the fact that he's kept doing it from 65 to whatever 90 something he is, that's where that curve really became a hockey stick. So to your point, young people, a little bit, what you can do decades out makes a big difference. The other thing, I wanted to emphasize is to take the meeting. I really like that. I wrote that down because, and I think I've mentioned this with another guest, but, when you go to business school, like I did at Anderson, at UCLA, it's all about networking, building your network. Like that's an asset you have, just like, just like your, something on your balance sheet. Oh, I have this asset, especially when you're younger. I might not have this, I might have yet that assets, but I've got this network. So I don't need to know the answer to everything, but if I know somebody who knows the answer, then I do know the answer to everything. And, as we've talked about these meetings, the things that you have, the changes, some self-directed and some weather-directed, you were able to, I think, turn those into potential, from potential negative or, real challenges to positive because you were open-minded to the situation and to people and what was going on. And you referenced that, with regard to Monogram. So I want physicians to hear that because, you don't really learn that in medical training. Take a meeting. That's not part of but it could be something that's very important for your long-term career and happiness because some doors will open by taking those meetings that wouldn't happen otherwise.
Yeah. I think within the doctor community, because we're all high achievers academically, within that group, there's also people that are leaders. So when you join your local hospital committees or your organizations that support your field and get involved with others who are doing that, it creates that internal network that creates opportunities down the road. And I think that's something that young doctors often don't do because they're too busy or don't want to. But you have something to say. We have something to say, and you will be heard. Yeah. Because, when we do talk about things, people do want to hear our opinions in general about our experiences. So I think that's something that's a missed opportunity for a lot of people when they don't jump on those committees and become the people that are on those committees 10 years later. Leading the hospitals or chiefs of staff and section chiefs and all that. That's how they got there. Right. They didn't get there by accident. So I think that's something that has to be planned out in advance. Just like the decisions you and I are making today are going to impact us 5 to 10 years from now. Even though wherever we are in life now, what we're doing today is going to make a difference. Yep. So I think you always have to think that way, that meeting today may impact you a year from now, 5 or 10, as opposed to next week. I think that's something I've learned in my career. I took a meeting with Monogram just on a whim, and it's the best decision I ever made, to be honest with you.
Right. Right. That's case in point right there. And that is true in many ways. So Shammi, I really appreciate you being on. Really interesting stuff. I think in the future, maybe in another year or a season or two, we'll have you back on because I know there's going to be more interesting stuff you guys are doing. Really, thanks for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Excellent. And for all the listeners, thank you for listening. If you're a physician who has an interesting story, which I'm sure many of you do, feel free to contact me. I'm always looking for new guests. As well, tell your partners, tell your colleagues, et cetera. We want to get the word out on this podcast. And again, in another 2 weeks, we'll have another episode. Thank you for tuning in. Shammi, again, thanks for joining us. And we'll see you again in another couple of weeks.
Great. Thanks, David.
Thanks for listening. The Wealth Planning for the Modern Physician podcast is brought to you by OJM Group, a multidisciplinary wealth management firm dedicated to helping physicians build and preserve their wealth while reducing taxes. Podcast listeners can get a free copy of our newest book, Wealth Planning for the Modern Physician. Simply text WPPOD to 844-418-1212 and click the link in the reply text to request your free print copy or ebook download. Be sure to join David for the next episode of the podcast. It's important to note that this content is for informational purposes only and does not represent personalized investment advice, as the information may not be suitable for your personal circumstances. Please contact your investment advisor before implementing any of the strategies discussed.